Should I start? So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Your Excellencies, I hereby declare the second plenary session of the 28th meeting of OSCE Ministerial Council open. Now we will continue with the agenda, item statements by heads of delegation. Before continuing with the list of speakers, I would like to remind you that the speaking time is limited to 3 minutes, so please respect it. Thank you for your understanding. Now I'd like to give the floor to the next speaker on the list, distinguished representative of the country, Serbia. So I'd like to give the floor to His Excellency Minister Selakovic. Nikola, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear Olta, distinguished chairperson, Excellencies, dear colleagues, it's a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to make an address at today's event. I would like to thank to the Kingdom of Sweden and to the Madam Chairperson for the hospitality and excellent organization of the Ministerial Council in Stockholm, held under very complicated circumstances due to COVID-19 pandemic. Moreover, the 28th Ministerial Council is held at a very sensitive moment for the future of our organization, which has been facing serious and accumulated problems for years. Unfortunately, with the outbreak of new and exacerbation of existing conflicts, as well as the constant emergence of additional challenges, the situation is becoming increasingly complicated. Despite our efforts over the years, further widening of the gap, lack of political will, and the openness to engage in constructive and substantive dialogue have contributed to undermining the foundations on which this organization was built. The 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Helsinki Final Act is approaching, and it should be borne in mind that this document, during the Cold War, set out 10 fundamental principles for regulating relations between states and thus made the world a better and safer place. I'm convinced that we should show greater responsibility for the future of the organization, political will and readiness for dialogue and compromises, while adhering to the principles and commitments arising from this important document, as well as those undertaken by participating in the work of the OSCE. It is a deeply divided world. At the time of the CSCE and the adoption of the Helsinki Final Act, the détente led to the end of the Cold War, while today the solution of the current situation should be sought in rebuilding trust. To achieve this, it is necessary to accept that despite divergent views on the existing problems and challenges, we need to respect our differences and show openness and engage in dialogue in good faith. We need to be ready for compromise in the process of eliminating or at least reducing security risks. In these efforts, multilateralism should be our most important instrument, and the return to the fundamental principles of the Helsinki Final Act should be our goal. The lack of multilateralism, as well as non-adherence to our selective application of principles and obligations, will certainly lead us to new conflicts. Ladies and gentlemen, Serbia, as a country located in a sensitive area, sees the OSCE as one of the most important platforms for dialogue on all security issues. Despite the challenges and accumulated problems facing the organization today, its solid foundations, developed mechanisms, and flexibility clearly indicate that the OSCE remains a valuable instrument of collective and comprehensive security. Serbia believes that the current initiatives and proposals regarding the future of our organization should be carefully considered and the best solutions adopted, which will contribute to strengthening the capacities and visibility of the OSCE. We could reach this goal through dialogue with willingness for compromise and respect for the principle of consensus as a basic principle of the organization. Dear colleagues, the OSCE presence on the ground is one of the unique features and an added value to this important international organization, which can best be seen in the example of the region of Southeast Europe. Despite the fact that the region have gone a long way in the implementation of comprehensive reforms during the years of the OSCE presence, I believe that the OSCE missions still have a significant role to play both in strengthening the democratic capacity and supporting further reforms in the region, and also in strengthening cooperation in Southeastern Europe, and therefore the stability of this part of the European continent. During the 20-year-long activity of the OSCE mission to Serbia, we have strived to make the most of its expert support in the process of comprehensive reforms and the society and of our exceptional cooperation based on partner relations since its very establishment. I would like also to commend the cooperation with the OSCE mission in Kosovo and Metohija, which represents the most visible international status-neutral presence in the province, acting in accordance with the mandate based on UN Security Council Resolution 1244. Let me also briefly touch upon the cooperation and relations in our region. Despite the slowdown in the EU enlargement process, Serbia has shown its commitment to European integration and regional cooperation through concrete economic and infrastructure projects. We believe that only through cooperation with neighbors, with a readiness to respect the interests of all, can we reach sustainable solutions to the problems in the region. The best example of such cooperation is the Open Balkan Initiative, which was initiated and further developed by the joint effort of three countries, Serbia, Albania, and North Macedonia. On the other hand, I would like to express my deep concern and regret over the security situation in Kosovo and Metohija this year, marked by an increasing number of ethnically motivated attacks and incidents targeting members of the Serb community, as well as institutional discrimination, attacks on the religious sites of Serbian Orthodox Church, and undermining the economic sustainability of the Serb community in province. Despite the efforts that my country has made in the process of the dialogue and the fact that we have fulfilled the obligations arising from the Brussels Agreement, the Pristina politicians have so far shown no readiness to fulfill the obligations on their own. Instead, they have been making unilateral moves, insisting on their agenda of the so-called statehood while refusing for more than 8 years to implement the obligation taken under the Brussels Agreement to establish the community of Serb municipalities, which the Serb community in Kosovo and Metohija sees as a guarantee of its survival in the province. Even though this is the case, we remain fully committed to the process of dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, which is conducted with the facilitation of EU, with the goal of protecting the Serbian cultural heritage and providing the fundamental rights and freedoms for Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija. Last but not least, let me express our support and readiness to cooperate with the upcoming Polish chairmanship and wish every success and extend support to our neighbor, North Macedonia, which will join the OSCE Troika in less than a month. Thank you for your attention.
I thank His Excellency Nikola Selakovic, and I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, the distinguished representative of Finland, His Excellency Pekka Olavi Haavisto.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, colleagues, excellencies. The OSCE is a key forum to discuss European security, and the OSCE is well equipped for conflict prevention and resolution. Arms control measures are an integral part of the OSCE toolbox. We should make full use of the OSCE's confidence and security building measures and implement the commitments we have all taken, starting from the Helsinki Final Act. The conflict in and around Ukraine remains unresolved and continues to have a profound impact on our security situation. The Minsk agreements and political dialogue remain the basis for solving the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Russia has the key role and main responsibility. Finland fully supports Ukraine's sovereignty and integrity in the internationally recognized borders. Finland remains committed to supporting conflict resolution in Ukraine through the OSCE. It's important to recall the commitments in the Charter of Paris, refrain from the threat and use of force against the territorial integrity or independence of any state, and fully respect other freedoms of choice. Concerning Nagorno-Karabakh, Finland, as a member of the OSCE Minsk Group, supports the efforts towards a lasting political solution. We continue to support efforts of the OSCE towards the resolution of conflicts in Georgia and in the Republic of Moldova within the agreed formats. Human rights and fundamental freedoms, democracy and the rule of law are at the core of the OSCE's comprehensive security concept. The human rights situation in Belarus continues to deteriorate. We call on Belarus to stop the instrumentalization of human beings for political purposes and putting people's lives in danger. Belarus should respect the fundamental freedoms and human rights to which it has committed. Finland is firmly committed to strengthening peace, stability and dialogue in Europe and is ready to assume the chairpersonship of the OSCE in 2025. We would have preferred that the decision on the chairpersonship of Estonia for 2024 would have also been made. Finally, Madam Chair, I would like to thank the Swedish chairpersonship and particularly Minister Ann Linde personally for the huge effort you have made in taking the OSCE agenda forward, and wish all the best to Poland for 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uzbekistan, His Excellency Abdulaziz Kamilov.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Uzbekistan delegation, please allow me to express our sincere appreciation to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden and Ms. Ann Linde and her colleagues for hospitality and excellent organization of the OSCE Ministerial Council. I am pleased to highlight the growing dynamics of cooperation between Uzbekistan and OSCE and its institutions in all three dimensions of security. This year alone, heads of almost all key OSCE institutions have visited our countries. We stand for continuation of this joint work and a balanced increase in the number of projects. Dear colleagues, democratic transformations are one of the key priorities of our interaction with the OSCE. Uzbekistan has been taking decisive steps to improve the protection of human rights, especially those of women, children, and persons with disabilities. Active work is being carried out to ensure freedom of the mass media, the independence of the judiciary, and the rule of law, the freedom of religion, and to fight against corruption. On October 24th this year, presidential elections were held in Uzbekistan. They were organized in full completions with the national legislation and generally recognized international standards. I'd like to express gratitude to the OSCE, especially to the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, and the Parliamentary Assembly for their active participation in the observation of the elections, objective assessment, and recommendations. We intend to closely cooperate with the ODIHR on the practical implementation of the recommendations. And this year, the OSCE ODIHR Director, Mr. Matteo Mikachi, visited twice Uzbekistan. Dear participants of the forum, negative consequences of the climate change have impeded the sustainable development of our countries. In this regard, we believe it is important to coordinate responses to ecological problems, including cooperation in environmental protection and biodiversity conservation. A huge work is underway in Uzbekistan to form a new landscape forest and soil cover on the area of 2 million hectares. By 2030, the share of renewable energy in the country will increase to 25%. A national low carbon development strategy being developed. The solution of the RLC problem and the complex of related social and environmental issues also remain for us a priority. We hope that the OSCE participating states would support our efforts. We call for cooperation on the practical implementation of the UN General Assembly resolution on declaring the RLC region a zone of ecological innovation and technologies, adopted by the initiative of Uzbekistan, as well as on support to the active of the Multi-Partner Trust Fund for Human Security for the RLC region under the auspices of the United Nations in order to provide assistance to the population living in area with difficult ecological conditions. Dear participant, in conclusion, let me once again express my gratitude to the Swedish OSCE chairpersonship for the worthy fulfillment of its duties, and wish success to the Republic of Poland, which will take over the chairpersonship for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. So now I'd like to give the floor to the next speaker, distinguished representative of Tajikistan, His Excellency Sirojidin Muridin. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Distinguished Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, let me join other speakers and congratulate the Swedish chairmanship for its outstanding leadership during the year and express my sincere gratitude to the government of Sweden for its generous hospitality as well as excellent organization of our meeting. Madam Chair, I would like to draw your attention to the situation in Afghanistan. Recent development in this country linked to the political and humanitarian crisis and governance pose a serious threat to regional security and stability. The violent rise of Taliban to power, the members of which are enlisted as terrorists by the United Nations Security Council, has further complicated the region's already complex geopolitical process. In these alarming circumstances, it is of paramount importance for Tajikistan to strengthen the border with Afghanistan and create an efficient border infrastructure along its entire length. Another concerning fact posed by the rise of Taliban is a grave humanitarian crisis and starvation which is unfolding in Afghanistan, and we cannot remain indifferent to the fate of the suffering Afghan people. To this end, an urgent humanitarian assistance has to be provided directly to the Afghan people in a non-discriminatory manner across all sections of the Afghan society, especially during this winter. Tajikistan is ready to provide this communication means to all stakeholders and donor countries for delivering necessary humanitarian goods to the people of Afghanistan. And in this regard, we are closely cooperating with the World Food Programme and other organizations. Distinguished colleagues, Tajikistan considered the cooperation and investment of the OSCE participating states within the second dimension of the organization very timely. Now, the negative impact of the climate change, particularly on economies, can be observed worldwide, and Central Asian region, including Tajikistan, is not an exception. My country, as the main water generator in Central Asia, is facing extreme challenges of climate change. Our glaciers are melting rapidly. A solution to these challenges can only be achieved through concerted efforts. As a part of our contribution, the President of Tajikistan has proposed to declare 2025 as the International Year for Glaciers Preservation and setting a date for World Glaciers Day. In this regard, we invite the OSCE to strengthen its economic and environmental dimension by developing and implementing practical projects linked to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Madam Chairperson, Tajikistan has always been supportive of civil society's active involvement in the country's political life and takes concrete measures to fulfill its international obligations and commitments in the field of human rights. Nevertheless, we strongly oppose providing a platform to the representatives of the terrorist and extremist groups under the guise of civil society in the OSCE. The government of Tajikistan remains adherent to its international commitments and continues to support the active role of the OSCE in all dimensions, including the cross-dimensional projects aimed at addressing transnational threats in Central Asia and beyond. In conclusion, I would like to once again commend the Swedish chairmanship for its professional management of the organization work in 2021 and congratulate the Republic of Poland on the assumption of the OSCE chairmanship next year, wishing it every success in their endeavors. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister. I now give the floor to the representative of San Marino, His Excellency Luca Beccari. Minister, the floor is yours.
Signora Presidente, onorevoli colleghi, signore e signori, il 2021 come il 2020 è stato un altro anno molto duro per tutti noi. Prima di tutto vorrei estendere le mie condoglianze a tutti voi e ai vostri concittadini che hanno perso i propri cari a causa della pandemia in corso. Vi auguro una rapida e solida ripresa economica. Il 2021 è stato un anno duro anche per il multilateralismo. Consentitemi di estendere i miei sentiti ringraziamenti alla Presidenza svedese che è riuscita a portare avanti il lavoro dell'OSCE in condizioni difficili pur continuando a lavorare per il consolidamento della sicurezza nella nostra regione e proponendo nuovi formati e nuove soluzioni. Ovviamente le sfide che oggi affrontiamo non riguardano solo l'area che va da Vancouver a Vladivostok, ma riguardano l'intero pianeta. In tutto il mondo purtroppo registriamo crescenti tensioni militari su vecchi e nuovi fronti, assistiamo ad allarmanti catastrofi ambientali e vediamo una raccapricciante erosione dei diritti umani delle istituzioni democratiche. Tutte queste tendenze hanno danneggiato sensibilmente la capacità del multilateralismo di fornire soluzioni. Tutto ciò è particolarmente evidente quando si guarda la gestione dei vaccini anti-Covid in quest'ultimo anno. Sull'uso e la distribuzione di questi vaccini, invece di trovare soluzioni condivisi, abbiamo assistito a uno scontro politico che ha avuto ripercussioni drammatiche sulle vite dei più bisognosi. In questa prospettiva, cari colleghi, qual è il contributo che questa organizzazione può offrire all'interno e oltre i confini dei nostri 57 paesi? San Marino crede che la regola del consenso debba diventare il punto di forza dell'OSCE e non la sua debolezza. È vitale che le decisioni che prenderemo assieme siano basate su una genuina e concreta volontà di cooperare, di abbattere le barriere vecchie e nuove che ci dividono e di superare una controproducente politica dei blocchi. Il nostro successo sarà misurato non sul numero delle decisioni che prenderemo, ma sulla loro portata e rilevanza. San Marino continuerà a dedicare un'attenzione speciale a quelle questioni che stanno particolarmente a cuore alla sua popolazione, la promozione dei diritti umani fondamentali, prima di tutto il diritto alla vita, l'abolizione della pena di morte e il rispetto dell'integrità territoriale. Al tempo stesso non rinunceremo mai al dialogo, perché solo attraverso il dialogo abbiamo un'opportunità di trovare soluzioni condivise e perciò sostenibili. In altre parole, solo attraverso un'ostinata promozione del dialogo e del multilateralismo abbiamo un'opportunità di promuovere la sicurezza e la cooperazione nella nostra regione. Un altro asset inestimabile della nostra organizzazione è rappresentato dalle sue istituzioni autonome e dalle operazioni sul campo. Grazie a loro siamo più vicini alle persone e possiamo comprendere meglio i problemi che ci riguardano. Conoscendo meglio i problemi possiamo elaborare soluzioni migliori. Pertanto, signor Presidente, desidero reiterare il supporto di San Marino al segretariato, all'ODHR, al rappresentante per la libertà dei media, all'Alto Commissariato sulle minoranze nazionali, all'Assemblea parlamentare e alle missioni sul campo. Mi auguro si possa giungere in tempi rapidi all'adozione del bilancio dell'organizzazione, senza strumentalizzazioni che ritardano e complicano le nostre attività e i nostri progetti. In conclusione, formulo i migliori auguri alla prossima presidenza polacca e i miei ringraziamenti agli Stati che si sono proposti per i prossimi anni alla presidenza dell'OSCE, garantendo ordine e proseguimento ai nostri lavori. Grazie per l'attenzione.
Thank you so much, Minister. I now give the floor to the representative of Armenia, His Excellency Ararat Mirozyan. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to join my colleagues in thanking the OSCE Swedish chairpersonship for steering the organization throughout the year. 1 year after the war of aggression unleashed by Azerbaijan against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh and the conclusion of the November 9th trilateral statement, the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh and on borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan remains tense. Since May 2021, Azerbaijani armed forces have infiltrated across the borders of Armenia. Up to now, they maintain and continue strengthening their illegal presence on the sovereign territory of Armenia. By its aggressive actions, Azerbaijan is flagrantly violating the Charter of the United Nations and the principles of the Helsinki Final Act. Needless to say, Azerbaijan's actions also violate its obligations under the trilateral statement of 9th of November on cessation of all hostilities. Another feature of the use of force is a constant attempt of Azerbaijan not merely to hold but capture more Armenian servicemen and civilians. Not only does Azerbaijan continue to ignore the calls of the international community for the immediate and unconditional release of all Armenian prisoners of war and civilian hostages, but on a number of instances, most recently on 16th of November, its armed forces captured more military personnel in the course of its attack on the territory of Republic of Armenia. No pretext can justify these violent actions. The continued presence of Azerbaijani armed forces on the territory of Armenia is a factor of destabilization in our region. We hope that the November 26th trilateral meeting organized by the Russian Federation will pave the way for undertaking certain measures towards de-escalation of the situation or measures in the measures in the region. Dear colleagues, the use of force has never been a way to peace in general and in particular in our region. The use of force can defreeze dormant conflicts for a certain period of time, but they will get frozen again once there is no negotiated and peaceful solution. We can come as a unilateral choice, but peace always requires consent of all the sides. Armenia is willing to achieve lasting peace and stability in the South Caucasus and is ready for negotiations to achieve that. The sooner Azerbaijan embarks on the resumption of the peace process, the better will be chances to achieve comprehensive and durable settlement in our region. The definition of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh, based on the realization of the right to self-determination, the safe and dignified return of the displaced Armenian population in safety and dignity to the entire territory of the Nagorno-Karabakh, should be substantive issues of negotiations. Equally, the resolution of pending humanitarian issues such as unconditional return of all Armenian POWs and all other captives, inquiry into the cases of enforced disappearances, protection of cultural heritage, necessitates strong engagement of the OSCE and its relevant mandates. With this in mind, Armenia will further contribute towards the resumption of a full-fledged Nagorno-Karabakh peace process under the auspices of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairmanship in close cooperation with all OSCE Minsk Group co-chairing countries. In closing, I would like to welcome Poland as an incoming chair of the OSCE and wish them every success. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I now give the floor to the representative of Lithuania, His Excellency Gabrielius Landsbergis. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Our OSCE Ministerial Council is taking place at a dangerous moment. We're talking about the consensus in these organizations and how we need to keep it. It would be useful to remind ourselves consensus on what and between whom. On one side of the consensus, Russian troops amass on Ukraine's border, worsening already existing tensions. Russia continues to infringe on the territorial integrity of Ukraine, Georgia, and the Republic of Moldova. Civic space is shrinking in Russia itself. NGOs are labeled foreign agents, free media voices silenced, civil society groups and religious communities designated as terrorist organizations. Human Rights Foundation Memorial is about to be banned. Key opposition leader and fighter against corruption, Alexei Navalny, is in jail. The dictator in Minsk lures thousands of vulnerable people from Asia and Africa to the European border and tries to push them through this border into the EU, absolutely disregarding dignity of these persons. But few people around this table could be convinced that this is anything else than a simple attempt to push the EU into giving up the targeted sanctions for systemic human rights violations in Belarus. This is done by the OSCE participating state, which abuses the international refugee protection system and migration law. On the other side of the consensus, which I mentioned at the beginning, we are trying to control the flows of migrants that are pushed on the European borders, and in doing that, we must also adhere to the humanitarian obligations that we are assigned to. Also, we are giving shelter to the people who were abused in Belarus and Russia, so that they would have a safe space to live and work. We provide them what was taken from them in their own home countries. And here, I must emphasize again, in participating states of the OSCE. So forgive me when I'm less than optimistic that it is possible to find a consensus between these fundamental attitudes. To reverse this trend and move on, we would need trust among the participating states. That is why I support the motto of Swedish chairperson in office, back to the basics. To me, it means respect for the values and principles on which this organization was founded, getting back to the consensus under which the organization was found. Indeed, there is only one way to make sense of the OSCE again. This is to return to basics and to insist on full and honest implementation of the Helsinki Final Act, the Istanbul Commitments, the EU-mediated 2008 ceasefire agreement ending the Russia-Georgia war, the Normandy Summit decisions and Minsk Agreement with regard to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, to name a few. Only then will the OSCE be able to move forward along all three dimensions of security. Let us support the OSCE institutions and field missions and protect them from attempts to terminate or limit their mandates. Let the ideas of Andrei Sakharov inspire their organization in order to help democracy, human rights, and rule of law prevail in our countries and in their mutual relations. I wish with this we could reconfirm our consensus. Madam Chair, let me congratulate Poland taking over the chairmanship for the next year and Finland for assuming the chairmanship of the OSCE in 2025. But saying this, I have to regret that unprecedented blocking of Estonia's candidature by the two countries that were mentioned during my intervention. And in conclusion, I would like to praise Sweden for its determined and principled leadership at the helm of the OSCE throughout 2021, and to wish success to the incoming Polish chairperson in office. I thank you.
Thank you so much. The next speaker on the list is the representative of Hungary, His Excellency Peter Szijjártó. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Ota. Dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to express our appreciation and congratulations to Anne and the whole Swedish Foreign Ministry to lead this organization under a very challenging period of time. We do look at the OSCE as the best and, unfortunately, maybe the last platform provided to East-to-West dialogue. I'm representing a country of the Central European region, and for us, such a dialogue is crucial. In case there is no such a dialogue, in case there are only conflicts between East and West, that definitely goes against our national security interest. Our history has taught us very clear lessons. That's why we are always urging for a pragmatic and respect-based cooperation and dialogue between so-called East and so-called West, and we do consider this organization as the best platform. Since we are here on an OSCE meeting, of course, I have to say a couple of words about Ukraine, which is our direct neighbor. That's why we definitely stand up for its territorial integrity and sovereignty. However, we can never accept national minorities becoming collateral damage to the crisis situation in any country. Using the conflict as an excuse for the violation of human rights, including the minority rights, contradicts our common European values. We maintain our position that the already existing and acquired rights of national minorities must be restored. We don't ask for anything which would be extraordinary. We just ask the Ukrainian authorities to give back the same rights to the national communities, including the Hungarians, which they used to have before the current restrictive legislation has been passed. In this regard, we would like to cherish the activities of our High Commissioner on National Minorities. Now let me turn to the two major challenges our world is facing now. First, the COVID. We see new variants coming up, and science does have to cope with this challenge. And we all know that there are successful scientific and medical communities both at the eastern and the western part of the world. They should work together. Now it is about saving lives of the people. Millions, maybe tens of millions. That's why political aspects and ideological aspects should be left aside. Just like when it comes to the issue of vaccines, which we consider them very simply as they are, matters to save lives, tools to save lives of the people, and nothing to do with politics or ideology. The other major challenge we have been faced with is security related. This is the massive illegal migratory flows. European Union is now under pressure from three directions simultaneously, which has never been the case so far. The situation in Afghanistan puts duties and obligations on us because we have to tackle those security challenges which have remained there. We have to prevent Afghanistan from becoming a hotbed of terrorism and a source of additional migratory flows. We have to strengthen the border protection efforts of ours. Hungary has stopped 110,000 illegal migrants this year already at the external border of the European Union and the Schengen zone. And we know that if we do not work together with the countries in Central Asia, then the pressure on Europe will be much bigger than it used to be back in 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear Ota, I'd like to express our appreciation for Sweden once again, and we wish all the best of luck to our Polish brothers to lead this organization in the challenging months ahead of us. Thank you, dear Ota.
Thank you, dear Peter. The next speaker on my list is the country representative of Iceland, His Excellency Guðlaugur Thor Thordarson. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I'm obviously not Guðlaugur Þór Þórðarson, but my name is Þórdís Gylfadóttir. I'm very newly appointed. Madam Chairperson, dear colleagues, I congratulate the Swedish chair for her capable leadership during her term in office. Her steadfast commitment and resilience have been exemplary, especially during this trying year in which our organization has faced real difficulties in carrying out its mandate. With our jointly agreed commitments and principles challenged on many fronts. It is in times like these that we should look back to the foundation of our work, the Helsinki Final Act, which created this unique and inclusive forum to promote stability of frontiers, peaceful settlement of disputes, and the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. We must not lose sight of these collective objectives. They are just as relevant now as they were back in 1975. Madam Chairperson, promoting security and stability in the OSCE region is at the heart of this organization's mission. As participating states, we all hold the responsibility of upholding these commitments. Current efforts to destabilize our region are therefore deeply troubling, with the situation in both Belarus and the Ukraine being of significant concern. Elsewhere, in Nagorno-Karabakh and in Georgia's Abkhazia and South Ossetia regions, we are witnessing ongoing tensions too, demonstrating how fragile the security situation is and how important it is not to undermine it. We reiterate our full support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders and territorial waters, and call on Russia to return control of Crimea to Ukraine. We likewise call on Belarus to stop human rights abuses within its borders and to refrain from orchestrating further threats to neighboring states. The advancement of human rights and democracy are likewise central of the OSCE's mandates. With the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights and its Human Dimensions implementation meetings playing a key role. We were therefore very disappointed that despite laudable efforts by the Swedish chair, the convening of the meeting was blocked this year. It is critical that the HDIM will be back on the agenda next year, providing the much needed space for genuine and open dialogue with civil society in our region. Promoting women, peace and security agenda is essential in this regard. Iceland attaches great importance to the promotion of women's rights across all OSCE's dimensions, including countering all forms of violence against women. Madam Chair, looking ahead, it is critical that we continue to reinforce the core values enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act and take forward our joint agenda on security and safety, economy, environment, and democracy and human rights. I call on all participating states to recommit to our vision of a safe and secure future and to collaborate constructively with the Polish chairpersonship in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Thordis, and apologies for not being prompt enough to update our list and the change. I'd now like to give the floor to Montenegro, His Excellency George Radulovic. George, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olta. Allow me first to congratulate the Swedish chairmanship for the active leadership through another extremely challenging year, and as well as for the strong dedication to the fundamentals of the OSCE that has marked this presidency. We continue to witness fragile and deteriorating security situation in the OSCE region, which has been exacerbated by COVID pandemic. We are also faced with significant external challenges, such as the situation in Afghanistan, to which we cannot afford to remain idle. At the same time, the existing divides and erosion of trust and confidence amongst us pose substantial obstacles for our joint action that is critically needed to enable effective functioning of the organization towards strengthening of security and stability across the continent. It is more than evident that we need to engage in genuine dialogue and show political will for compromise to ensure the OSCE is able to address complex security challenges in the line with its comprehensive approach, which we as a country strongly support. Respect for human rights forms a central ingredient of such an approach, and therefore we deeply regret that we were not able to find a common way in order to unblock the annual Human Dimension Implementation meeting. But it should be clear that we can't compromise on the upholding of the OSCE values and commitments and on the respect of international law. We all need to demonstrate responsible behavior and equal commitment towards agreed norms and principles upon which we can further build for the benefit of sustainable European security. Madam Chairperson, in this spirit, we reiterate our support for the Minsk agreements and their full implementation, the work of the normative format and the trilateral contact group, and for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. We regret the lack of consensus to extend the mandate of the Border Observer Mission, and we condemn the recent obstructions of the SMM work. Our common support to the mandate of the Special Monitoring Mission as a key confidence-building measure, which must have safe and unrestricted access throughout Ukraine, is therefore essential. We note with concern that recent hostilities and worsening humanitarian situation in the region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Likewise, we are encouraged by the resumption of direct engagement of parties at the highest level, as long-lasting peace can only be achieved through dialogue. We are concerned by the deteriorating human rights situation in Belarus and the instrumentalization of migrants and refugees for political reasons. As one of 35 countries that invoked Vienna mechanism, we continue to believe in the merits of the OSCE facilitated national dialogue in Belarus as a way to move towards the resolution of a crisis. Structured dialogue remains a useful platform for discussion, for discussing concerns in the political-military sphere, which we will continue to support. 25 years after the adoption of the framework for arms control in Lisbon, we need to continue to have an open and frank dialogue with a view to ensure full compliance and to reinforce these important agreements as they form a key pillar of European security architecture. We regret that for a second time since 2011, we were not able to modernize the Vienna document. Montenegro, as a co-sponsor of two proposals, will continue to advocate its full implementation. My country is also attached to the fulfillment of obligations in the area of small arms and light weapons and conventional ammunition. To this end, we are actively implementing the relevant roadmap as a part of Franco-German initiative for the region of Western Balkans. One of Montenegro's foreign policy priorities is regional cooperation and good neighborly relations. We are keen to see a stable and prosperous Western Balkans region in the view of the OSCE as an important strategic partner in achieving this objective. We need to adapt to the multifaceted challenges, climate being one of the urgent issues, and build systems and societies that will remain resilient to future external shock. I expect the decision on climate change to be only the beginning of a future engagement and contribution of the OSCE in this field. At the same time, I deeply regret that, unlike on climate, we were unable to find a common position on some other important issues we discussed intensively throughout this year, including freedom of expression of media, women economic empowerment, transnational organized crime, or SALF and SAA. I'm equally disappointed that we do not seem sufficiently willing to find solutions to some of the internal organizational issues that consume our time and detract us from engaging in dialogue and substantive issues. In this context, I would like to refer to the issue of OSCE chairmanship for 2024, for which we find Estonia's candidacy well suited. Let me conclude by wishing Poland success next year and by reassuring you that my country will remain committed to the basic principles and values of the OSCE and continue to be a reliable partner in moving forward the work of the organization across all three dimensions. Thank you very much, and my apologies for exceeding time.
Thank you so much. The next speaker on the list is Portugal, His Excellency Minister Santos Silva. Augusto, The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam, dear colleagues. Let me begin by thanking Minister Ann Linde for her hospitality and commending the Swedish chairmanship for steering the OSCE through a challenging year and for organizing this ministerial council. I want also to fully align myself with the intervention of the High Representative of the European Union on behalf of the Union. The OSCE remains the world's largest regional security organization and a fundamental platform for multilateral cooperation, benefiting the participating states and our neighboring partners for cooperation. As we approach the 50th anniversary of the organization's founding document, we must not lose sight of the Helsinki vision of a free, democratic and indivisible Euro-Atlantic and Eurasian security community, rooted in agreed principles, shared commitments and common goals. We are facing serious challenges. As the UN Secretary-General Guterres put it, on almost every front, our world is under enormous stress. COVID-19 is a wake-up call, and we are oversleeping. We have been witnessing an erosion in the respect for democratic principles and human rights, namely freedom of expression, as well as negative developments in the fields of rule of law, tolerance and non-discrimination. Notwithstanding the progress achieved, more can be done to promote gender equality. We take this opportunity to underline the importance of the work carried out by the OSCE's autonomous institutions and field operations in assisting the participating states to uphold their human dimension commitments. The 25th anniversary of the Representative on Freedom of the Media next year will hopefully offer the OSCE an opportunity to devote particular attention to such commitments regarding media and freedom of expression. The COVID-19 pandemic has enhanced pre-existing inequalities. These are critical challenges which compel us to reinvent our policies and to create innovative solutions. To put it shortly, we have to work together. It is my firm conviction that is the only way to that end is effective multilateralism, as the security of each participating state is linked to that of all the others. The persisting conflicts in the OSCE region deteriorate the living conditions of the affected populations and polarized participating states, undermining overall trust in the organization. We need a fresh impetus to make the OSCE fit for purpose. The crisis in and around Ukraine, which lasts already for more than 7 years, raises grave concern among us. I therefore call on swift and full implementation of the Minsk agreements in order to achieve a sustainable political solution to the conflict in line with the OSCE principles and commitments. It is our collective responsibility to help to restore trust and renew political dialogue. Finally, Portugal welcomes the reinforcement of the ocean climate nexus in the Glasgow Climate Pact and supports scaling up ocean action. The upcoming second United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon from June 27th to July the 1st next year will be an important milestone in this regard. I hope to welcome you in my home country with your heads of state and government this summer in Lisbon. I would like to wish Poland all the success in the new chairmanship, and I assure of Portugal's engagement and support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'd like to give the floor to Azerbaijan, His Excellency Minister Bayramov. The floor is yours.
Madam Chairperson, at the outset, I would like to congratulate Her Excellency Ms. Ann Linde, the OSCE Chairperson in office, for hospitality and excellent organization of the Ministerial Council. I wish every success to our distinguished colleague, His Excellency Mr. Zbigniew Rau of Poland, as the incoming chairperson in office. Dear colleagues, the Ministerial Council meeting almost coincided with the first anniversary of the trilateral statement of Armenia, Azerbaijan and the Russian Federation that put an end to the armed conflict and set the agreed parameters for establishing durable peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This statement was further complemented by the trilateral statements of 11 January 2021, specifically dealing with the opening of transport communications in the region. Nagorno-Karabakh conflict that lasted for almost 30 years is over. Immediately after the end of the conflict, Azerbaijan has proactively engaged in large-scale construction works in the liberated territories. To this end, only this year 1.3 billion has been allocated from the state budget. We have already accomplished construction of infrastructure and facilities, such as highways and airports. Cultural and religious monuments vandalized, desecrated or misappropriated during occupation are now being rebuilt and renovated. Thus, the traces of occupation are being eliminated and the return of normal life is well underway. The OSCE, with its experience and available tools in post-conflict rehabilitation, can contribute to this process. We have proposed the OSCE to be engaged in targeted and demand-driven practical cooperation with Azerbaijan and are still expecting response. In the meantime, the end of the conflict presents a unique opportunity for both Armenia and Azerbaijan to move forward in building good neighborly interstate relations on the basis of mutual recognition of and respect for each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of international borders. Azerbaijan repeatedly emphasized its readiness in this regard and took several unilateral steps in practice immediately after the end of the conflict. Armenia is yet to reciprocate. In this context, continued violations by Armenia of its commitments under the trilateral statements are source of serious concern. Armenia has yet to comply with the 10 November trilateral statements and fully withdraw its armed forces from the territories of Azerbaijan. Delay in restoration of all economic and transport links in the region must be seized. It is a significant confidence-building and post-conflict normalization measure, along with its vast economic benefits for all concerned. Soonest operationalization of the Zangezur corridor is needed not only for unobstructed movement of persons, vehicles and cargo between mainland Azerbaijan and its Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, it will also restore transport communications between Azerbaijan and Armenia in both directions, and those will serve the cause of irreversible peace and cooperation and create new unprecedented opportunities for the whole region. Armenia has also failed to submit full and accurate maps of all mined areas. This slows down the process of post-conflict rehabilitation and reconstruction in the liberated territories and poses a serious barrier to the return of internal displaced persons to their homes in safety and dignity. Presently, Azerbaijan is among the most heavily mined countries in the world. Since the signing of the trilateral statements, 180 citizens of Azerbaijan, including 71 civilians, among them journalists and other media workers, have been killed or seriously wounded due to explosions of mines indiscriminately laid by Armenia. Additional pressure needs to be exerted on Armenia to provide accurate maps of all mined areas, in line with its obligation under customary international humanitarian law. Furthermore, Armenia has yet to implement its obligations with regard to identifying and whereabouts of close to 4,000 Azerbaijanis missing since the armed hostilities in early 1990s. This is important for healing the wounds of the former conflict. Distinguished ministers, with liberation of territories of Azerbaijan from occupation, the justice and order are restored, replacing the so-called reality that Armenia had created by force in violation of international law. As a result, peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan is within reach for the first time after nearly 3 decades. In this regard, the meeting of the leaders of Azerbaijan, the Russian Federation and Armenia in Sochi on November 26 proved to be a significant step forward. The three leaders held detailed and substantive discussions on the implementation of previously agreed parameters and also identified further steps related to post-conflict normalization. The establishment by the end of this year of a bilateral Armenia-Azerbaijan Commission with consultative role of the Russian Federation for border delimitation and demarcation is of particular importance. Azerbaijan expects that these agreements will be realized in practice without delay and contribute to our goal of transforming the South Caucasus into a more stable and predictable space. At the current critical juncture, joint efforts by the entire international community are needed to help consolidate security and stability. The best thing the international community could do now is to avoid reinvigorating false expectations and instead focus all its efforts towards contributing to the full implementation of the trilateral statements and practical engagement with Armenia and Azerbaijan for building confidence and stability in the region. The OSCE Minsk Group can also be helpful in post-conflict context in normalization between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In view of changed realities, we call upon our colleagues and partners to assess and take advantage of new promising opportunities in the region for development and cooperation. I request that this statement be attached to the journal of the day. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you so much. I now give the floor to Monaco, His Excellency Minister Anselmi. The floor is yours.
Madame la Présidente, chers collègues, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais tout d'abord m'associer à tous ceux qui m'ont précédé pour féliciter la présidence suédoise, non seulement pour la qualité de son accueil, dans un contexte sanitaire compliqué, mais également pour les efforts déployés tout au long de l'année en vue de mettre en œuvre les objectifs qu'elle s'était fixés et relever les nombreux défis auxquels l'OSCE est confrontée. Permettez-moi une nouvelle fois de réaffirmer l'importance qu'attache la principauté de Monaco au multilatéralisme dans la recherche de solutions intégrées et durables face à des problématiques dépassant nos frontières et qui ne peuvent s'envisager de manière individuelle. À ce titre, il est primordial que chaque État participant contribue à mettre l'OSCE en mesure de jouer pleinement son rôle fédérateur, notamment en s'évertuant à rechercher un véritable consensus. Il est indéniable que la zone OSCE fait face à une recrudescence des tensions. Les crispations dans la zone du Haut-Karabakh et les mouvements à la frontière entre la Biélorussie et la Pologne constituent, entre autres, des situations sur lesquelles notre organisation doit éminemment se pencher. Nous savons, il n'y a pas d'alternative durable à une résolution politique des conflits. Je salue par ailleurs le rôle d'importance joué par les missions de l'OSCE sur le terrain et réaffirme le soutien du gouvernement princier à leur action. Madame la Présidente, chacune des dimensions de notre organisation contribue au concept global de sécurité. À ce titre, les conférences organisées dans le cadre de la dimension économique et environnementale ont porté sur des thématiques fort pertinentes, telles que les liens entre le climat et la sécurité, la lutte contre la corruption, la promotion de la bonne gouvernance ou encore l'autonomisation des femmes. Nous soutenons ainsi les efforts de l'OSCE visant à sensibiliser les gouvernements et les populations à la nécessité de mettre en œuvre des politiques de développement permettant d'assurer une croissance durable et de renforcer la confiance dans les relations de bon voisinage. La pandémie a exacerbé les tensions et les crises, mais nous a fait aussi prendre pleinement conscience des réponses que nous pouvons et devons y apporter ensemble. La criminalité transnationale organisée s'est adaptée au contexte de la pandémie en usant de toutes les ressources des nouvelles technologies. Certaines activités illégales se sont amplifiées, en ligne ou hors ligne, tirant profit des failles existantes dans la collaboration entre les États. Intensifier la coopération est la seule et unique façon de combattre une criminalité qui se joue des frontières étatiques. L'OSCE a, à cet égard, un rôle déterminant, complémentaire et transversal à jouer pour faciliter le dialogue, l'entraide et l'échange d'informations entre États. Madame la Présidente, comme vous le savez, Son Altesse Sérénissime, le prince Albert II, s'est personnellement engagé de longue date devant les instances internationales et sur le terrain, au plus près des populations, en faveur de la préservation de l'environnement et de la mise en œuvre d'un développement durable. La principauté de Monaco appelle ainsi l'OSCE à poursuivre ses efforts pour renforcer les capacités de sa dimension environnementale. Pour sa part, Monaco multiplie des initiatives visant à sensibiliser tous les pays à une bonne gouvernance des écosystèmes marins, ainsi qu'à une gestion durable de l'eau, des pêches et de toutes les ressources naturelles indispensables à la vie humaine. Enfin, 2021 a vu confirmer la persistance du phénomène migratoire et se multiplier les tragédies, plus particulièrement en Méditerranée ou récemment dans la Manche. Une réponse concertée est nécessaire pour faire face à ce défi sécuritaire, politique et humanitaire, notamment dans le contexte sanitaire actuel. Le renouvellement de l'accord de financement entre le gouvernement princier et l'OSCE dans le domaine de la lutte contre la traite des êtres humains, assigné ici même avec Mme Helga Schmidt, est un témoignage supplémentaire de la volonté de la principauté de promouvoir le dialogue et la coopération entre les États afin de lutter contre ce fléau. Plus que jamais, il est indispensable que nous apportions collectivement des solutions appropriées pour préserver la dignité des migrants. Monaco souhaite une nouvelle fois réaffirmer son profond attachement à cette dimension et notamment la défense des droits de l'homme et à la promotion de la tolérance, de la non-discrimination et des libertés fondamentales. Madame la Présidente, comme le pensait déjà Jean Baudin au XVIe siècle, il n'est de richesse que de femmes et d'hommes. Ainsi, qu'il s'agisse de la lutte contre toutes les formes de discrimination, contre le terrorisme, contre les trafics illicites ou contre la violence à l'encontre des femmes, les filles et les personnes vulnérables, aucun sujet de discussion ne doit être relayé au second plan. Vous pouvez compter sur le soutien de la Principauté de Monaco pour que toutes ces questions demeurent à l'ordre du jour et que soient recherchées, dans une approche multilatérale, des solutions consensuelles. Pour conclure, permettez-moi de remercier à nouveau la présidence suédoise pour l'ensemble du travail réalisé cette année et d'exprimer notre soutien à la présidence polonaise qui s'apprête à prendre les rênes de notre organisation. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you so much. Going back to the remarks of Minister Bayramov, please note that the request of Azerbaijan is duly noted. The next participating state on the list is Albania, so I would like to take the opportunity to address you in my national capacity. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start also by thanking Minister Linde for hosting us. I also take the opportunity to congratulate her and the Swedish team in Vienna for their work during the chairpersonship of OSCE. I commend her for her strong leadership in what has been a quite challenging time for this organization and for security and cooperation in Europe in general. However, this ministerial is a very good opportunity for all of us to take a deep breath and stop to think about the insecurity and instability that seem to be growing in the OSCE space. Because I believe the situation has not been this precarious in quite a while. Of course, right now, most of the attention is focused in and around Ukraine, which is a very concerning situation with real risks of escalation and seemingly very little room for dialogue. Because I think when parties to any conflict start talking about red lines, that is not very conducive to constructive discussions and negotiations. But while the situation in Ukraine, with its potential repercussions for the security of Europe, is actually drawing most of the attention, if we just pause for a moment and think, it is hard not to come to the conclusion that this has been a particularly bad year for the OSCE space. We have seen war, we have seen plenty of threats of war and wars of words, we have seen escalating tensions, we have seen refugee crises, and generally speaking, a much more fluid and unpredictable security and cooperation environment than most of us would wish. And I'm not even discussing here the threats from the pandemic or from climate change. If I look at our area, the Western Balkans, where Albania sits, I do not remember being this concerned about the stability and security of the Western Balkans in a long while. Indeed, if you look at the trend of the Western Balkans over the past 2 decades at least, it has been one of consolidated peace and stability, growing cooperation and development and prosperity. And yet, suddenly old problems are coming up with newfound force and conjuring up the ghosts of the old politics of the Balkans, from which our regions has suffered so much. There are many explanations about what is going on, and I guess many of us will not see eye to eye on those explanations. But if we leave aside for a moment this inability to agree on the causes of the restlessness, if I may call it that, from which many of the areas under the OSCE umbrella seem to be suffering, I sense there is a bigger problem yet. There is, in many cases, almost an outright rejection of dialogue, almost an impulse to think of problems in terms of zero-sum game solutions. I do not want to overgeneralize or oversimplify. Many of the situations that concern us today do have history and backgrounds that are quite complex and intricate and not easy to solve. But if you look at closely, in many cases, the parties to any disagreement seem to have a preference for saying their last words first and leaving very little room to dialogue. This in itself is not the cause, but rather a symptom of something deeper that is happening in international relations today. Many of the principles around which organizations such as the OSCE were founded are being eroded. Respect for dialogue, respect for the rules-based system, respect for negotiations. The entire architecture of peace and security and stability that has governed not just Europe, but the world, is being eroded. That, I believe, is the real problem. As I said, dialogue is never easy, especially in a climate of significant polarization in international and domestic politics. But I staunchly believe that dialogue is the only way. It is this belief and commitment to the value of dialogue that underpins Albanian foreign policy. That is the reason why in our region we have embarked on an unparalleled action, the Open Balkans Initiative, which in essence is an effort to expedite the Berlin process. Of course, there are unresolved issues between and among many of the people and countries in our region. But we believe that by talking, by cooperating, by showing our people and our communities how they stand to profit from cooperation instead of conflict, we will create an imperative for peace and stability and working together. We strongly believe that organizations such as the OSCE, ultimately all of us that make up this organization, have an obligation to uphold the principles and the rules that form the foundations of not just this organization or any other organization, but of peace, security, and development. And we should not forget, even for a moment, that the erosion of these principles, the instability that erosion produces, form a threat in equal measure to all of our countries and societies, because we all face a difficult battle with violent radicalism, transnational organized crime, trafficking, or, as the past 2 years have shown, pandemic and climate change. And it is because of this that Albania supported Sweden's back to basics approach. It was the belief in dialogue and cooperation and commitment to the rule-based system that informed our work during our chairpersonship of the organization. And I want to underline that this approach will also guide Albania's work when it very shortly, in less than a month, will sit at the UN Security Council for a 2-year mandate. We face this unique opportunity for a small country like Albania with realism about what we can truly achieve. But we also face this opportunity with optimism too, because we believe that we have important ideas and solutions to contribute to the major issues that concern us. By drawing on the experience of our OSCE chairpersonship, I believe that we can have an impact, of course, by joining forces with like-minded countries on issues that we very strongly believe in, like women, peace and security. We strongly value the role of the OSCE in implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and we strongly commend Sweden and its commitment to this agenda, while Albania too pursued with commitment during its chair of the organization. Gender equality, women, peace and security have become one of the main pillars of the Albanian domestic and foreign policy and our first priority in Albania's UN Security Council mandate. But this is not the only agenda in which we are working to have an active role and make an impact. We are striving too to explore new partnerships and consolidate existing ones with an eye to the security challenges the OSCE area faces from the situations in Afghanistan or North Africa. So we will build on the good work Albania has done during its chair of the organization, including the achievements of the Tirana Ministerial Council, its position in the Troika, and its work as chair of the OSCE Asian partners when it comes to Afghanistan, or the advancement of the Mediterranean dimension of our security. Once again, congratulations for the Swedish leadership during 2021. We wish success to our Polish friends on their upcoming chairmanship, as well as to our neighbor North Macedonia as the new Troika member. Thank you. And the next speaker on my list is Andorra, Her Excellency Minister Ubak Font. Dear Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, allow me to join previous speakers in thanking Minister Ann Linde and her team for their work at the helm of the organization, guided by the motto, "It's about our commitments, our security, our OSCE." Andorra reiterates its firm commitment towards an effective and inclusive multilateralism based on the respect for the rules-based international order, cooperation and dialogue to address jointly the current challenges in a constructive and goal-oriented manner. In times of growing tensions, the OSCE must remain a platform for dialogue to contribute to an effective multilateralism. In this context, we reiterate the importance of upholding to our principles and commitments and providing the OSCE with adequate financial and human resources to be able to deliver in an efficient way. The resolution of the conflicts is key for stability and security in the OSCE region. To this end, Andorra strongly supports a full, equal and meaningful participation of women in all phases of the conflict cycle and in the decision-making processes to advance towards peace and security. We underline the urgency to find a peaceful and sustainable solution to the protracted conflicts in the OSCE region and the crisis in and around Ukraine within the existing formats guided by the principles of international law, dialogue and consensus. We reiterate our full support to the work of SMM and the TCG to advance in the full implementation of the Minsk agreements. Madam Chairman, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown the transnational and cross-cutting nature of the threats and challenges to security and the urgent need to build economic, environmental and human resilience. In this framework, the government of Andorra has taken an inclusive approach through participatory processes to include all stakeholders from civil society to private and public institutions to find sustainable solutions in line with the United Nations 2030 agenda. Madame la Présidente, aucun effort ne doit être épargné dans la lutte conjointe contre le crime organisé, la corruption, le trafic des personnes et le financement du terrorisme. Nous nous félicitons de l'impulsion donnée à la dimension économique et environnementale de cette année pour faire avancer l'autonomisation économique des femmes et le travail visant à la protection de l'environnement et son lien avec le tourisme durable. La résilience environnementale est une priorité pour l'Andorre. Notre Parlement a approuvé à l'unanimité la déclaration de l'état d'urgence climatique et a promulgué une loi en faveur de la transition énergétique et le changement climatique. Des progrès sont également réalisés dans la promotion d'une économie verte. Nous nous réjouissons de la prédisposition de la Finlande d'assumer la présidence de l'OSCE en 2025, année qui marque le 50e anniversaire de l'acte final d'Helsinki. Pour conclure, au nom du gouvernement de la Principauté d'Andorre, je souhaite réitérer le plein soutien de mon pays à l'OSCE, ses institutions indépendantes, l'Assemblée parlementaire et les missions sur le terrain, qui sont la colonne vertébrale de l'organisation. Permettez-moi également d'exprimer mes meilleurs vœux de succès et de réussite à la présidence polonaise et lui assurer également la pleine coopération de l'Andorre. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much. So the next speaker on the list is Moldova, His Excellency Minister Popescu. The floor is yours.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, I would like to join the previous speakers in expressing gratitude to the Swedish OSCE chairpersonship, personally to Minister Ann Linde for organizing this Ministerial Council meeting in these challenging times. Madam Chair, it was here in Stockholm back in 1992 when the ministers participating at the third CSCE Ministerial Council committed to use the CSCE to consolidate human rights, democracy, the rule of law and economic freedom as the foundation for peace, security and stability, and to prevent, manage and solve conflicts. These commitments are among the core elements of the European security order. Regretfully, many of these commitments still need to be implemented. For the Republic of Moldova, that Council bears a special significance, as it adopted the first ever consensual ministerial language referring to Moldova, stating in particular that a final political settlement of the conflict should be reached in order to establish durable peace in the region. While the situation in my country on the ground has been peaceful for almost 3 decades, little progress has been made towards fulfilling the objective set 29 years ago, achieving a final political settlement of the conflict in the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova. We reaffirm the need to achieve a comprehensive, peaceful and sustainable settlement of the Transnistrian conflict based on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of Moldova within its internationally recognized borders with a special status for Transnistrian region. We are glad that this goal will be reiterated in the OSCE ministerial statement on the negotiations in the 5+2 format. At the same time, efforts should continue towards resolving urgent issues and easing life of citizens residing in the region where possible. Here are some examples. The Moldovan authorities shared with the Transnistrian region more than 300 doses of anti-COVID-19 vaccines. Also, on the issue of transport, which is discussed in the negotiation process, we are glad that the number of residents from the region applying for neutral number plates has tripled. We remain committed to work on other issues related to the transport area in line with our international commitments and relevant legislation. However, as a general remark, many problems that the Transnistrian region is facing will only be resolved in the framework of a comprehensive political solution. Madam Chair, a special area of our concern is the further deterioration of the situation of human rights in the Transnistrian region. This issue was raised many times in the Permanent Council over the last years. The ongoing violation of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the region must stop. We also count on your active support and involvement in curbing the cases of political pressure on dissenting voices, illegal detentions and convictions, as well as in releasing political prisoners. The issue of ensuring appropriate conditions for the functioning of Latin script schools in the region should also be resolved. Dear colleagues, in December 1992, the Stockholm Ministerial Council adopted a decision that referred for the first time to the issue of Russian troops withdrawal from the Republic of Moldova. In particular, it envisaged the early, orderly and complete withdrawal of foreign troops. Let me recall that the continued presence of a so-called operative group of Russian troops and stockpiles of munitions in Kobasna has no legal ground, is in contradiction with international commitments and the permanent neutrality status of the Republic of Moldova. In this context, we reiterate our readiness to engage in a constructive dialogue to follow up at a practical level on the initiative launched 2 years ago by the Russian Federation regarding the disposal of non-transportable munitions. This process should be conducted in a transparent manner, and the OSCE could play a relevant role in accordance with its mandate. This would be an important step towards the resumption of the withdrawal of Russian troops, military equipment and ammunition from the territory of the Republic of Moldova in accordance with its long-standing commitments. We also need to keep on the agenda the issue of transformation of the current peacekeeping mechanism into a multinational civilian mission under international mandate. In conclusion, I would like to thank once again the Swedish chairpersonship for their efforts in 2021 and express our strong support for the incoming Polish chairpersonship. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So the next speaker on the list is Kyrgyzstan, His Excellency Minister Kazakbayev. The floor is yours.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель, уважаемая госпожа председатель, уважаемая госпожа генеральный секретарь, дамы и господа. Позвольте выразить искреннюю благодарность действующему председателю ОБСЕ, министру иностранных дел Швеции госпоже Ан Линде и ее профессиональной команде за успешное выполнение функций председательства в нашей организации. Отдельно благодарим генерального секретаря госпожу Хельга Шмидт за плодотворную работу. Наша организация уникальна как с географической позиции пространства ОБСЕ, ее членского состава, так и с точки зрения объемного мандата, который прочно основан на концепции всеобъемлющей безопасности. Уважаемые коллеги, не секрет, что в нашей организации ныне имеются внутренние вопросы, связанные с доверием, что в свою очередь делает затруднительным процесс достижения консенсуса. Считаем, что нам всем необходимо сосредоточиться над решением наших внутренних разногласий и, объединившись, противостоять всем глобальным вызовам и рискам. Уважаемые дамы и господа, за десятилетие сотрудничества Кыргызской Республики с партнерами по ОБСЕ была создана благодатная почва для создания и укрепления прозрачных и эффективных демократических институтов. Безусловно, все это внесло и свой позитивный эффект проведения парламентских выборов в Кыргызстане 28 ноября текущего года. Для содействия обеспечению прозрачности этих выборов традиционно были приглашены миссии наблюдателей ряда региональных и международных организаций. В целом, за ходом выборов в Кыргызской Республике осуществляли наблюдение свыше 736 международных наблюдателей из 54 организаций, представляющих 58 стран мира. Международные наблюдатели подчеркнули высокий организационный уровень избирательного процесса и отметили, что выборы прошли прозрачно и на конкурентной основе, что для нас имеет принципиальное значение. Выражаем признательность всем международным наблюдателям, включая представителей Шанхайской организации сотрудничества, СНГ, Организации договора коллективной безопасности, Организации тюркоязычных государств, Организации исламского сотрудничества, Парламентской ассамблеи Совета Европы, а также отдельно БДИПЧ ОБСЕ, Парламентская ассамблея ОБСЕ. А также позвольте поблагодарить директора БДИПЧ ОБСЕ господина Матео Микаччи и его команду за профессиональное участие в наблюдательном процессе. Надеемся на дальнейшее конструктивное сотрудничество и вновь приглашаем БДИПЧ ОБСЕ в Кыргызстан для презентации и обсуждения окончательных итогов наблюдения. Состоявшимися парламентскими выборами в Кыргызстане завершился цикл основных политических мероприятий, запущенных после октябрьских событий прошлого года. Политические события 2005, 2010, 2020 года в Кыргызстане показывают мировому сообществу, что свободолюбивый многонациональный народ Кыргызстана, являясь подлинным источником власти в нашей стране, уже никогда не свернет с пути демократии. Мы были и остаемся приверженными ключевым демократическим принципам верховенства права, защите прав и свобод человека. Уважаемые коллеги, как и весь мир, Кыргызстан пристально наблюдает за развитием напряженной военно-политической ситуации и социально-экономической обстановки в Афганистане, которая усугубляется наступлением осенне-зимнего периода. Надеемся на скорейшее установление стабильности и правопорядка в этой стране. По нашему видению, продолжение политического диалога с нынешним руководством Афганистана – единственное правильное решение для поиска взаимоприемлемых путей стабилизации ситуации в стране. Кыргызская республика оказывала и готова дальше оказывать гуманитарную помощь Афганистану. Также Кыргызская республика предоставила возможность 500 молодым афганцам обучаться в наших университетах, преимущественно с женщинами из Афганистана, в том числе в Академии ОБСЕ в Бишкеке и на базе Американского университета Центральной Азии в Бишкеке. Призываю государства-участников финансово поддержать деятельность Академии. Другим предложением кыргызской стороны является создание на базе Академии ОБСЕ в Бишкеке Центра исследований по Афганистану, который мог бы стать независимым академическим аналитическим центром для региональных и международных экспертов по изучению происходящих процессов в Афганистане и выработке рекомендаций по реагированию на них. Уважаемые дамы и господа, еще одной проблемой глобального масштаба, требующей консолидации усилий всех стран мира, частного сектора и гражданского общества, является изменение климата. Кыргызская республика поставила перед собой амбициозные цели сократить выбросы парниковых газов и к 2050 году достичь углеродной нейтральности.
Реализация этих целей будет зависеть от международной поддержки. Хотел бы призвать государств-участников ОБСЕ поддержать инициативу об учреждении под эгидой ООН специализированного климатического фонда, направленного на реализацию конкретных проектов по борьбе и адаптации к изменению климата. Под риском исчезновения также находятся многовековые ледники, реки и биоразнообразие горных экосистем Кыргызстана. Для Кыргызстана критически важно сохранить свои многовековые ледники, водные ресурсы и величественные горы не только от изменения климата, но и от недобросовестной экономической деятельности, которую проводят некоторые иностранные транснациональные компании. Уважаемые коллеги, Кыргызская республика неизменно выступает за повышение значимой экономической деятельности ОБСЕ, без соблюдения которой сложно говорить о безопасности в комплексе. Особо важным в контексте пандемии является поддержание и укрепление торгово-экономических связей. Призываем государства-участники содействовать повышению взаимосвязанности на пространстве ОБСЕ путем обеспечения свободного и безопасного передвижения через границы товаров, услуг и инвестиций. Приоритетным для Кыргызстана также остаются вопросы борьбы с коррупцией и цифровой трансформацией. Приветствуем расширение программно-технического содействия ОБСЕ по данным направлениям в тех странах, которые заинтересованы в этом целью достижения национальных приоритетов развития. Уважаемые коллеги, как известно, в следующем году будет отмечаться 30-летие присоединения государств Центральноазиатского региона к ОБСЕ. Предлагаю в этой связи организовать совещание высокого уровня Центральная Азия ОБСЕ с участием глав Министерства иностранных дел государств Центральной Азии, действующего председателя ОБСЕ, глав всех институтов ОБСЕ. Предлагаемое совещание позволит нам подвести итоги сотрудничества и наметить совместные планы на перспективу в целях обеспечения всеобъемлющей, основанной на сотрудничестве, неделимой безопасности Центральной Азии и всего региона ОБСЕ. Рассчитываем на вашу широкую поддержку данной инициативы. Хотел бы еще раз поблагодарить министра иностранных дел Швеции, госпожу Ан Линде, за прекрасное гостеприимство и за огромный труд, проделанный в течение всего года председательства шведской стороны. Поздравляю коллегу, министра иностранных дел Польши, господина Збигнева Рау, с принятием ответственной миссии на посту действующего председателя ОБСЕ в 2022 году. Желаю успешного и плодотворного председательства всей польской команде. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues. In reminding you of the time limit, I would like to also highlight that I've been informed that Armenia wishes to attach their statement to the journal of the day. The request has been duly noted. The next speaker on the list is Estonia, Her Excellency Eva Maria Limets. Eva Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The OSCE is an important forum for multilateral dialogue and for ensuring peace and stability. As a sign of Estonia's dedication, we offered our readiness to lead the OSCE in 2024. We were the only candidate for the year, and I would like to thank all the countries who have supported us. Regrettably, 2 countries blocked us without any substantive reasoning. Vetoing vital decisions is counterproductive to the OSCE's interests and principles. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to uphold and strengthen our common principles. The world order based on international law and democracy is a key element for peace and security. The effectiveness of the OSCE depends on reliable and constructive multilateral dialogue, cooperation and political will. Regrettably, too often the true political will is not there. Obstruction and narrow interest restrain the organization's work. What happened with 2021 budget and HDM are just few examples. Regarding current budget proceedings, I support the Secretary General's proposals and I see a strong merit in streamlining the budget process as proposed before meeting by Germany and Switzerland. In general, we should not fool ourselves that complicating the organization's functioning through budgetary and procedural issues would not have consequences to its functioning and thus on our security. I commend our chair's efforts to prepare meaningful and forward-taking decisions and statements of our Ministerial Council. I am disappointed that there was no consensus on majority of the proposals. This is simply irresponsible to address problems and not act accordingly. This is a challenge to the OSCE principles. I call all participating states who have doubts in our principles and tasks to reassess their true values. The autonomous institutions of the OSCE are indispensable pillars of the organization by promoting and guarding our values. Their authority cannot be undermined. Celebrating the 30th anniversary of the ODIHR reminded us even more the values and challenges related to ensuring the respect of the principles of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and democracy. We are worried that the Belarus authorities have disregarded several times the concerns raised through OSCE's human rights instruments and rejected contacts with the OSCE institutions. Belarus continues to break international human rights standards also by using migrant trafficking as a tool against its neighbors and the EU. Dear colleagues, regarding ongoing conflicts and crises in the OSCE area, Russian Federation continues to violate international law by illegal annexation of Crimea and aggression in certain parts of eastern Ukraine. We are following with great concern the Russian military buildup near Ukrainian borders, and even more in parallel by blocking the continuation of OSCE's border observer mission and restricting the activities of the SMM. We are also deeply worried about the Russian military buildup in the occupied regions of Georgia, in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and ongoing violations of fundamental freedoms and human rights in these regions. We welcome the recent and coming talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We have been concerned to witness serious military actions near the border of the two states and urge the sides to find long-term settlement to the issues with the assistance of the OSCE. Estonia reaffirms the OSCE's important role in supporting the Transnistrian settlement process in the 5+2 format in accordance with Moldova's full sovereignty. Trust, predictability, and military transparency in Europe have been seriously challenged. We have the respective measures to avoid tensions and build confidence. However, they serve its purpose only if all parties fulfill their obligations fully, not selectively. Thank you, Foreign Minister Linde, and all your team for your dedicated chairmanship. Would like to wish all success to Poland and also congratulate Finland for the appointment to the OSCE's chair for 2025. The year we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, which is an excellent opportunity to refresh the spirit of Helsinki. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I'd like to give the floor to Bosnia-Herzegovina, Her Excellency Minister Turkovic. Dear Bisera, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Madam Chairwoman, distinguished heads of delegations, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor and a pleasure to address the 28th Ministerial Council on behalf of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Madam Chairwoman, allow me to start off by thanking you for hospitality and by joining my colleagues in congratulating to Sweden government for a remarkable chairmanship of the OSCE this year. Ladies and gentlemen, a truly global pandemic, an alarming increase in irregular migration, violent extremism and terrorism, the unresolved and protracted conflicts in the OSCE region continue to pose a severe threat to the European security. We are confronted with old and new challenges, not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but throughout the OSCE region. Holocaust and genocide deniers, those who celebrate convicted war criminals, right-wing extremists and nationalists, those ready to take what is not theirs, persons who undermine the very basis of our democracies and our common values. They are unfortunately many. Nevertheless, we simply must work twice as hard to challenge them and their narrative, and do all that we can to help them return to peaceful, democratic, and prosperous society based on respect, mutual understanding, and open dialogue. The conflict in Ukraine, which is still the most important challenge to security and stability in Europe, should remain high on our agenda. Political will is urgently required, with commitments translated into action and implementation of Minsk agreement. We should spare no effort to continue our support to the Special Monitoring Mission and its staff for the successful implementation of its mandate. SMM must continue its work with the full freedom of movement, with unhindered, safe and secure access throughout Ukraine. Afghanistan presents a humanitarian, security and political crisis whose proportions are of great concern. For Bosnia and Herzegovina, regional cooperation continues to be one of the cornerstones of our foreign policy. We will continue with our active approach towards substantial and meaningful contribution to regional security and stability, both within multilateral organizations as well as bilaterally with our neighbors and friends. Dear friends, we had a year behind us in which multilateralism itself was frequently questioned. A delayed annual security review conference, a late budget, a year without a human dimension implementation meeting, and now the decision on a chairpersonship in office of Estonia for 2024 is in question. I'll be frank, all this is both troubling and disappointing. As participating state of this organization, we have certain rights, but we also have obligations. And one of those obligations is to, whenever we can, put our differences aside and come together for a common good. We need to compromise and to find a common position on these important issues. When Bosnia and Herzegovina is in question, I strongly stand behind the words of Minister Lavrov said during the dinner last night. Let us be honest. I agree. Let us. Honesty forces us to state that the high-ranking member of the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the leader of the largest political party in one of Bosnia and Herzegovina's entity is effectively calling for secession of that entity. He has particularly announced plans to withdraw from the Bosnia and Herzegovina armed forces, to take over the state facilities on territory of that entity, and to establish the entity's own army. This move would effectively destroy years of progress in the area of defense reform in Bosnia and Herzegovina. On October 20th, he announced withdrawal from Bosnia and Herzegovina's Agency for